Good evening. Welcome to Chasing the Facts. I'm your host, Sam Chase, and our guest for this show is Jeff Doherty, former dean at Chelmsford High School. So we're very glad to have you, Jeff, and welcome to our show. And what we ask of each guest is to just give us a little bit of a brief biographical sketch and leading up to when you started with the Chelmsford Public Schools.
Sure. Thank you for having me, Sam. I graduated from Tewksbury High in 1971, attended Merrimack College where I got my degree in English and a minor in education, and that was in 1975. And I student taught that spring at Parker and McCarthy. I taught 9th grade at Parker with Pat Mahoney and 8th grade at McCarthy with Midge Wilson. And I had been subbing for a year before that. And that first year I came out of college, there weren't any jobs, so I did a permanent sub job. I tutored, and I did daily substituting. And then I was hired June of 1976 to teach 7th grade English here at Parker. And I did that for 3 years till we went from 4 to 5 classes. So because of that, I was a low person. I got laid off. And then while I was interviewing for a job in Danvers, I had called home, and Ed Quinn, who was the dean of Emerson House, had called my house and said there was a job. So I began at the high school in September of 1979, and in July of 1995, I became dean of Emerson House, and I retired June 30th, 2014. I had gotten my master's degree in administration from ULowell in 1993. When I was teaching at the high school, I was the JV girls softball, soccer, indoor assistant coach. My last year as a dean, and the year I retired, I was the volunteer assistant JV girls tennis coach.
There you go.
I advised 2 classes, the class in 1983 and 89, directed and was in faculty plays, performed with the Theater Guild. I loved the high school. I mean, it was a home and it was a family, and I looked forward to going to work every day, and deciding to retire was one of the hardest decisions I had to make. But my son and daughter, Patrick and Bridget, Bridget graduated the year before I made the decision, and it was the right time, but from the minute I left, I missed it. It's a very special place with a lot of wonderful people. You know, the students, the staff, the teachers, parents, the community. I am very lucky that I ended up here.
I think that's a great story, and I think you're absolutely right. Of course, I've lived in Chelmsford now for a little over 40 years, and as you know, both my daughters went through the school system, and my wife was a teacher for 39 years in the system. And one thing that I always felt about the high school, as you say, is that it feels like a family.
Yes.
The staff, in my experience, was just outstanding. And I just, before we get into our discussion, I just want to tell a quick little story about Jeff. My older daughter, who graduated in 2002, Jennifer, had some difficulty, as many kids do, with speech when she was younger. And that aspect of her education was a little bit of a challenge for her. So language in general was a challenge, although she developed a wonderful reading skill. But when you are planning on going to college, you have to fulfill a foreign language requirement. Is that still true?
I believe it is.
Okay.
Yes,
and it certainly was at the time anyway. So the choices were 2 or 3 modern languages. And where my daughter was having some difficulty with English, we didn't know how this was going to be accomplished. Her meeting the requirement for foreign language. So in we go to see Jeff, and we talked about this, and Jeff looked at us and he said, well, have you thought about Latin? And I thought to myself, I can't believe that I didn't think about Latin, because I had 4 years of Latin in high school and I had a year in college on top of it. So why didn't I think of that, you know? But I guess I just wasn't thinking, you know, modern language as a requirement. And we talked a little about it, and Jeff said, you know, he said, with Jennifer, where she has such a terrific memory, which she does, she has a near photographic memory, he said Latin would be perfect. So based on your advice, she went into Latin, and she did very, very well, and she did so well that when she went to UMass, she was able to test out of the first-year requirements. So she took Latin for 1 year at the college level, and she fulfilled her foreign language requirements. So that is a story illustrating how a dean or a member of the staff at the high school takes an interest in the students and thinks a little bit outside the box, and it makes a difference. So I just wanted to tell the viewers that story, and we're still grateful to you for that.
Well, that was what made it worthwhile. Yeah. I mean, working directly with the students and parents and with the staff, and you hit it. It is a family. It's the feeling I had. It was my second family, and it's an amazing place because if you need somebody or if you're having an issue, people come together, and we're there to do and that's throughout all the schools, not just the high school. That everyone is there for what's best for the student. And sometimes that's hard decisions that people may not like that you make, but the intent is always to be what's going to help the student, what's going to make them not only learn subject matter, but what's going to help make them be a better person. And if we do our job right, like people ask me, how many students have you saved? And I haven't saved a single student. What we do is we give them the tools and the time and the understanding so that they can save themselves, because that's the skill they're going to need later on. So that was our role, and it was a role I loved it. I couldn't have, as I said, I couldn't have been in a better place.
Well, it's great, and we know that is continuing today.
It is.
And the basic structure of the high school, is it still the same? Do you still have the house system and so forth?
3 houses.
Yeah, that's good. That seems to work very well.
Well, even though you're separated into 3 houses, you take classes with students from everywhere. But you have 450, 500 students who are with you from 9th to 12th grade. And they have the same guidance counselor, same staff, and you really get to know them. When I taught and I coached and I did the drama club, I thought I knew kids, but when you take someone from 9th grade to 12th grade and you're with them through everything, the ups, the downs, and everything. I would tell the students at the beginning, our very first meeting, I said, 4 years are going to pass before you know it. And they would look at me and say, because you're old, so you think time's going to pass. But the greatest thrill the dean has is you're at the bottom of the ramp at graduation, and you're the last person to see them before they become high school graduates. And so you're there with them, and you tell them when to go up the ramp because they're petrified. And you're the last person, because once they get to the top of that ramp, they get their diploma, and symbolically they walk across the ramp like they're leaving, but it's like a family. I walked in one graduation, I was standing in front of the kids, and one of the girls said, we were at the stadium, she said, it's like your children are graduating. I said, yeah, you're right. And I think that's true of everyone at the high school, and it's there now, and it's true throughout all the schools, and I think that's something that makes this town special.
I would agree with you. I think you may have already partially answered this next question.
I tend to
that's
go on.
okay. But what made you decide to make the leap from being a classroom teacher into the administrative side of things?
I had gotten my degree because when you get the additional degree, there's a pay hike.
Yes, right.
And it had opened up. We had gone from 4 houses when Don Boucher retired. We went to 3. Then they closed Emerson House, so we were just 2 houses. And when Jack Conrad and Angie Toronto retired, I interviewed, and people were shocked that I would want to, interview for that job because I love teaching. And Al Thomas and Steve Meidel got the job, but when they opened the next year Emerson House, I said, it's time for a change. It's time, I have this degree. It's time for maybe I can add to the school in a different way. And you start it, you say, I'll do this for 5 years. Well, I was a dean for 19 years.
Right.
The only person longer than I was a dean was Jack Conrad, and I always threatened to do a year and a month just to beat his record.
Just to beat his record.
Just to beat Conrad's record. But if I was on my first administrative team, Steve Meidel was the principal, Bernie Battle, Al Thomas, and I were deans, and we all worked in the system, and it meshed, and it just...
I remember that time frame very well, and you folks really were a team. There's no question about it. We always felt that at the high school that it was a united front from an administrative effort, and everybody seemed, teachers, administrators, and so forth, everybody seemed to understand what the mission was, which you just articulated. So that's great. Great background. So now we come to the point in your retired life.
Yes.
Somehow you wound up on the school committee.
Yes, I did.
Would you care to describe to us how that happened?
Yes, my tennis partner and golf partner and good friend and colleague, Al Thomas.
Your ex-friend.
My ex-friend. Yeah, sometimes I think that way. He's so busy with the Rotary, as president of Rotary.
Yes.
It's amazing what Rotary does, and I don't think people realize how much time and effort Al puts into it. And so he wanted to step down from school committee so he could devote more time, but he was told he had to find a replacement. Mm-hmm. And so he had mentioned it to me, and I thought, nah, I think that's too much time. Then I spoke with Jay Lang, and I spoke with Dennis King, and I said, you start in August, September, and you go to April, and if you don't like it, at least you've tried it out, which you don't often get in positions like this.
So Al's term, you were finishing the last year of a 3-year term.
Right,
so,
of his third
okay,
term.
so, all right, I understand. All right, I can do this. Anybody can do it for a year, right? I can do this for a year. If I don't like it, then I just won't run again. All right.
But I found the committee is wonderful. The 4 people I work with on the committee, Dennis King and, everyone, John Moses, Maria Santos, Donna Newcomb, we work well together. It's kind of like that first administrative team. We can, you can have your disagreements, which are important. I think if you don't have disagreements, then you don't hear each other's ideas. Herb Levine, who was principal of the high school.
I remember Herb, yes.
He was when I did my internship, he was my mentor. Mm-hmm. And he said to the 4 of us, because he'd known us all, and he said, if you guys don't disagree once in a while, you're never going to grow as a team. Because
that's exactly right.
Right, so you had to hear it. But once you've made that decision, whether it goes your way or not, you have to support the decision. And I find with the committee I'm on now, we all come, 3 of us are in education, 2 people aren't. And so we have different views. But everyone's respectful and listens to everyone else's view, and each individual member is able to weigh the arguments and come down on what we believe is best for everyone in town, everyone involved in the schools. And with Jay Lang and Linda Hirsch, I've worked with Linda, and it's a good group, and we're heading in a really good direction. And the town's wonderfully supports the schools. We have this support of the town, and we're achieving something. And I have this thing where I want to give back, and I know that sounds corny, and I know that sounds like, but I really feel I owe, because of the incredible career experience, what happened. My wife Patty worked in the schools,
right.
Just retired. She was special ed chair, retired in June. My kids, Patrick and Bridget, got incredible educations, incredible experiences. I've been very fortunate, and I'd like to give back. I'd like to, my experience and my time and what I know of the town, I think is of value, because I think I bring history, and I think that's so important, that you need history, not just somebody who remembers when.
Right.
And can say, we tried this then. If we try it now, this isn't what worked then, but maybe it can work now.
I think it's, if you take a look at this particular school committee that you're serving on now, and you said you've got 3 folks that have backgrounds in education, and I think it makes a tremendous difference. I suppose they're depending on the individual's personality, that could be a negative, but in the case of your committee, I know all of you, and have tremendous respect for you, obviously, and the other members of the committee. And it does seem to be a well-working committee. You all seem to mesh well. And I've gotten to know Maria Santos quite well. She's liaison to the Economic Development Commission, which I happen to be on, and she shows up for every meeting and offers her insight and input. So it's just a good working group. So your experience is positive enough so that you decided to throw in for another 3-year term,
I
and
thought, yeah.
you are actually unopposed.
Yes.
So it looks like you're probably going to get the job
Yes.
again for another 3 years.
I could probably find a way to mess it up, but I think I'm pretty
I don't
all
think
set.
so. I don't think so. You know, you can look at the way it's shaped up now for the town election is none of the elective offices have any opposition. In fact, they did have, apparently, I understand they had trouble recruiting somebody to fill the 3rd library trustee position, but I see on the website they did get somebody to do that. And you can look at that one of two ways. You can say, well, nobody's interested, or you can look at it and say, well, you know what, the folks that are running for re-election are doing a pretty good job, so you're not challenged. And I think certainly in the case of the school committee, I think that's true. You know, you and Dennis are up for re-election, and I think even in the short period of time that you've been on the committee, you've shown good insight, and you've shown that you're a contributor and to the team as well as to the effort. So I'll congratulate you prematurely
Thank you.
For your upcoming victory. So that's great. What are some of the challenges you see going forward, Jeff? I mean, you talked a little bit about the finances, and you know, I think we do pretty well, but we're not Concord, we're not Wellesley, we don't have extra money to throw at the schools, and it's always a bit of a struggle. And we've had to contend with a flat state aid really for about the last, well, 15 years, because we got cuts back in 2002, and we never really fully recovered on a constant dollar basis from that. So it's been, the burden of the schools has been more and more on the property taxpayer in town. So do you see anything changing in that regard?
Not with the Chapter 70, even with what they've done with the new parts of it. Chelmsford, we're going to be level funded. We will get some money back for special ed transportation, but it's all on their formula. And when they created the formula, as you know, it's what they decide what our property values are worth and the income of the town, the general income of the town. That's what they base it upon.
Right.
And it's quite a learning curve to be on school committee, because you know, when you're in town, you're going like, oh yeah, you know, we should demand more money and things, but you really can't because of the Chapter 70 money. But the amazing thing is, Jay has put the budget up it's on the website now.
Yes.
And this is my first time going through, you know, a budget like this. And just for a plug, next Tuesday's school committee meeting will be the public hearing on the budget. So if you have a concern, come out. And if not, if you can't make it, you know, drop one of us an email, and you know, we'll answer your questions.
And where will that be held?
It'll be at the superintendent's office.
At the superintendent's office. And
At 6 o'clock.
It'll be either televised or taped.
It's usually televised live. And you know, but the thing is, if you go through the early parts of that report, they compare us to 9 other districts that are similar in demographics and student population. And even though they may be spending more money than we do, and we're right around the state, our results are much higher than a lot of those schools. And I think that's a testament to, you know, our teaching staff, our students, our support staff, our administration, and the parents and community. That Alan Bradshaw, this is going back a while.
I remember Alan.
Alan, when I was teaching, used to brag in Chelmsford because we did so well for such small a bigger bang for your buck in Chelmsford.
That's the exact phrase that I would use as well. And you know, I understand how most people, they don't really have anything to measure against or perspective. Everybody looks at their property tax bill and they say, oh, well, you know, we have high property taxes. But what I would encourage people to do is to go up on the Massachusetts Department of Revenue website and look at the Division of Local Services section. And you can get comparative statistics town to town. Pick the 10 or 11 towns that are contiguous or near contiguous to Chelmsford and see what the Chelmsford taxpayer is getting for his dollar versus what some of the other towns get. And they break all of the expenses down, and they show percentages in there. And what you'll find is that Chelmsford consistently gives you more value for the dollar. The one area of expense, and I don't know if this is still true, I think it may be, when I was looking at all these numbers, when I was on FinCom and Board of Selectmen, I had to keep up with this stuff. And our special ed budget was significantly higher than other towns around us. And that tended to skew some of the numbers. But even with that, we were still getting a very good bang for the buck. I would be concerned as a taxpayer if the average per pupil cost were $14,000 a year and ours was 20. Well, I'd say, wait a minute, something's wrong. But we are consistently under
The state.
the state average, not just the area average,
The
the
state
average. So if you're under the state average, you're probably getting a pretty good educational value for your tax dollar. And I would urge people to go look at that information. And they might be surprised. You know, we've always, since I've been in town anyway, we've always done well with the education dollars that are given to the school committee. And how would you characterize the relationship from the school committee standpoint between the school and the municipal administration? Do you see a cooperative relationship there, a collegial relationship?
It's very cooperative. I was on the capital planning committee.
Oh, okay,
so
good.
I was chosen for that, and this is the first time I've ever done that. And that committee's run by John Souza.
Yes.
Who does an incredible job. I mean, he is so well organized. And of course, Paul was there, Paul Cohen. And I'm looking out at all the different departments, and we have X amount of dollars we have to spend. And I'm like, somebody's going to be upset.
Yes, they are.
But I will tell you, when we went through, it wasn't. It was really cooperative. It was, you know, one department would say, all right, we got ours last year, so now you're going to get yours this year. We realize this amount of money. And the way it's prioritized and the way John and Paul set it up, you give who really needs it. And it's kind of understanding like, well, last year maybe the schools didn't get as much, so because there were other priorities in other departments. So this year the school gets a little more. So I talked to a couple people who I know, and they were fine. They said, all right, we didn't get it this year, we'll get it next year. Because I think there's that cooperation and understanding in all the departments. And I know when we did the tri-board meeting, you know, Paul Cohen had done the presentation, and everything was right out there. And I find that it works really well together, because there have been times, and you've been in town as long as I have, where it has been pretty negative,
Very
and pretty confrontational. And when you're one of the departments, when you're a teacher and you know this is going on, and it's because somebody's angry with somebody else, you might not have a job come September. But they work very well together. You know, I know Jay Lang and Paul Cohen, they understand each other's positions, and there's a respect there. And I see that in all the departments. And I don't think I would have seen it if I weren't in this position. And the capital planning was it was eye-opening for me, because it was all 5 members. We were all new. So there was nobody returning of the 5 of us. And it couldn't have gone better.
So the way it used to be structured, and tell me if this is still accurate, you had 3 folks representing different areas of school, town administration, and then you had 2 citizens at large?
Citizens, yep.
Okay, so, and then John Souza's a non-voting
Right, John organizes everything.
chair, right.
And people came up, made their presentations, and you know, you weren't rushed, and you went through it, and you listened, and then people would say, well, you could tell out in the audience that, well, maybe we can do this and maybe we can do that. So there was cooperation throughout, and we don't have to go through it, but we've been here when that wasn't there.
Yes,
and
we
it
have.
makes it so difficult for anyone to do their jobs.
Right. I mean, just looking on the outside, from the outside, I know Paul Cohen quite well, and I've come to know Jay Lang. And it's clear to me, you know, that both men are focused on their, as you say, their specific missions and administrative charters and everything. But in Paul's case, he values the schools and he values the educational product. And Jay has a very good understanding of what constraints the town is under from a budgetary standpoint, and understands and fully supports the obligations that have to be carried out under the administrative side. So as you said, there's a mutual understanding and respect that goes on, and it just makes life a lot easier. And I think that translates down to the next level. I know that the accounting folks over on the school side, the business office, and the town side, they get along very well. And there has to be that constant flow of information back and forth for that job to get done. And that wasn't always the case in the past either. So those things, I think, reflect the leadership. So
One I didn't realize, you find out all these, when you get on the board, all these additional responsibilities you didn't realize you had. Like, I love the liaisons. I'm a liaison to the integrated kindergarten CHIPS. They do incredible work. I'm at the high school PTO and with George Simone and the Alumni Association, because George is going to get me in on everything.
And he is still
91. I saw him today at the superintendent's.
Just the way he did 30 years ago.
And I should mention the Hall of Fame is March 21st.
Yes.
George still has tickets. So
Plug for the Hall of Fame.
Yes.
Call George Simonian or Terry Sheehan. Terry
McSheehan.
That's awful. I know Terry. I'm sorry, Terry. McSheehan.
Who's actually
Yes.
getting into the Hall of Fame this year.
Yes, he is. I saw that.
Wonderful. And George just, but I forget what I was talking about.
The
I
eye-opening-
signed the warrants,
Yes.
and I didn't realize
You
that
didn't?
the school committee members, you sign the financial warrants.
You do.
And the first time I did, it's like 3.5 hours because I went through everything. But you can tell Joanna Johnson-Connor, the financial person, she's so well organized, and her people are so well organized. And Jay, that it's good back and forth because everyone's on the same page and everyone understands each other. And it's amazing to see what goes into it when you don't, when you're just teaching, not just teaching, but when you're teaching, you're focused on your classroom. When you're a dean, you focus on your house and your school. But to see all this behind the scene things that make it work. It's like the man behind the curtain in The Wizard of Oz. And the people over there, they're incredible. And in the town side, it's the same thing.
I think that's absolutely true. We have a couple minutes left, and I just wonder if I'd like you to touch a little bit about on the subject of vocational education versus traditional high school and the situation we have here in Chelmsford. We have about 2 minutes to talk about that.
I think for some students, vocational education is exactly what they need. And I think I've worked with Neshoba, and I think for the right student, it's the right place to be. That if you're not academic, and if that's all you, but you're really good with your hands, or you have an interest in that, I think a strong relationship between the two schools is really important.
One thing I've noticed in the last several years, I'm going back maybe 25 or 30 years, there was always some sort of a line of demarcation and perhaps a stigma associated with the vocational, but now, with the administrations that we have in place, I think there's a better realization in town that really the vocational high school is part of the Chelmsford Public School educational system. And I get the sense that the folks at the high school look at that, as you just said, as a viable alternative for some students who may be more vocationally or technically oriented. And the school has been very successful getting kids into four-year colleges. A couple of years ago, I remember they had a couple of students go to MIT.
MIT.
And so that is definitely a viable alternative. And I'm glad to hear you say that because, again, that wasn't always the case either.
When I was first administrator and we wanted a student who was struggling at the high school because it wasn't the right place for him, they wouldn't take him. Well, obviously the grades aren't there. And it was kind of like, well, this was years ago.
Right.
But the grades aren't there because this is not the right place for this student. This student will succeed there. And it has over time, as you said, I've met the administration over there, and there is great cooperation because I think that's a resource that we really should be taking advantage of. Because whatever's good for kids, that's what we should be doing.
And that is the bottom line in
Yes.
education, and you certainly have been a tremendous practitioner of those theories and an excellent contributor to the Chelmsford Public School system and the educational product. So again, Jeff, thank you for appearing on the show. Congratulations in advance to your anticipated victory in April, and we look forward to having you on the school committee for another 3 years.
I look forward to it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sam.